Hello again, everyone. We took a break and took care of some business, and we're back in the studio. What we're going to do now, I've got a couple of more things I'd like to get up in front of you as part of our Getting Acquainted. The first thing is I want to talk about before people. I think I have some expertise in that. And I want to get the first 4, 5, 6 chapters of Genesis in. So we know what happens when we die. We know what happens when Jesus comes back. And we got these things in here already to think about. But let's figure out together, in a fellowship way, how we got started. So there's a lot of real bad teaching in this department. But it's not complicated. Remember, God's Word's simple. God's Word is straight. It's just up to you and I to sort this out. But the first thing let's get into is before Genesis 1, I want you to look at what I could tell you from my expertise from working in the coal fields of the Appalachian Mountains here in Virginia and other areas around Virginia that has coal mining as a proper way of making a living. So just to give you a little background, I have worked as a coal miner, as a mine foreman, as a mine superintendent, as a mine manager, and as a mine owner. I worked in shaft mines and slope mines. I worked in drift mines. And I've also, on a management level, worked at strip mining and surface mining. So we've seen a lot of geology and mining over the last, since before me. My older brothers and the miners before my time, they turned it over to my age group with an opportunity to mine and to produce clean coal. And I also have experience as management in preparation plants where we clean up the coal. So we had, over my working lifetime, we have got to where we can really mine good coal, clean coal, and make it cleaner by running it through a prep plant. It's pretty straightforward. But anyway, what I want to get about here is what we found out as people who were really exposed to moving a lot of earth or going deep into the mountain or deep down into the earth as miners and what we've seen. And let's give you a little example of a coal mining. Surface mining is up near the top of the mountain. Then you have mines at different levels. In the area where I spent most of my time, we had at least 3 drift, what we call drift, that goes straight back in the mountain. And we had different kinds of surface operations where we would take off part of the mountain. In some cases, we take off the whole top of the mountain in a very ecological friendly way. I think we worked that down to a science back in the 70s and 80s. All right, anyway, that makes people like me, we've been exposed to what's down there and what's in there. And when we take the top off, you really get a very vivid and accurate picture of what it is. So before people, there were animals. We have 3 earth ages. Now keep this in mind. The first earth age had no people like you and I. The second earth age has us. This is a short time we're going to be alive as biological humans. And then the third earth age, God willing, we'll be there. We will be there in the early part of it, at least even the sinners. But we will be in a different body, as we've seen in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. All right, so we've all went through that. But now what I want to talk about is this. I know the scientists, they dig up a bone here and a bone there, and over the last 40, 50 years, I know there's been a lot of people out burying bones so they can find them. And then somebody will find a bone, and people say, oh, he's found the missing link and all that stuff. All right, but I want you to know a little bit how this works. The coal seams, they run from Well, I know one that was on my dad's farm was like that thick, like a foot and a half or maybe 15 inches thick. But they run from that up to many feet thick, like I witnessed out in Wyoming, near Gillette. So we got different size coal seams, different quality coal, and they're all made by vegetation. Every one of them. Now I know you're going to get people preachers this way and that way, but now listen, you got to go by facts, and you got to have an open mind if you're going to learn anything, and have the ability to make the right decision when you decide something. But in the mining thing, we know they had to have animals in that first earth age to spread the seeds, and we know for every seam of coal in each area, like where we had at least 6. In some places probably more, but each seam of coal had to happen as a vegetation washed out, and in a huge flood would wash out into the water, ocean, lake, or wherever, and as the dirt was settled first, the dirt and the sand and stuff, it'll settle first to the bottom. The vegetation will float a while, and then it will sink on top of that, and it'll go right to the bottom. And then the other has to be a lot of rain and a lot of dirt moving. It will come over top of it and cover it up. Then you got a big layer of vegetation, probably 20, 30 foot thick. And this settles on it and compacts it. And then as it gets deeper, in between our coal seams, in between some seams is 400, 500, 600 feet. Between this coal seam and the next one, that much solid rock comes from sediments of sand from erosion from the water. Had a lot of water in the first earth age. All right. So as this happened many times, there had to be many different vegetation growth and floods. Now our father has been here many billions of years taking care of business, and he was getting the earth in that first earth age ready for us, but not with us. We were not there as biological people. We'll talk about whether or not we were there in a different body at another lecture. But as we come through this, we have made a real good print of time. Now we don't know the exact time, but if you're going to make from big rainstorms and earth and erosion and stuff to get 300 or 400 foot or even 100 foot. And in some coal seams, you'll have a coal and a seam of rock and more coal, which is a layer of sand that turns into rock. And there's different kinds of rock from different kinds of sand and all that. If you're people who are geologists, geological students or people who are biological, will understand that. The coal seams like we have in the United States in the area where I worked, and I've seen all the other areas that I haven't actually been a part of. But the coal seams cannot be made from vegetation like we have now. You see, our forests and our grass, even our cornfields wouldn't do it. It takes a special kind of vegetation to make the chemicals, to make coal and oil and gas. God made these for us. I don't know why people don't want to use them, but they're there for us, and they have been very beneficial to our whole society worldwide over the last 200 years. So we know that it was made. Now, as a witness to a lot of these things, I've uncovered many as a owner of surface mines and as mine managers and mine superintendents. I've uncovered many acres of coal and was able to look at it in a different light than most people ever get. And that is what's on top of it. When you get down to the coal in some places, you have huge ferns and different kinds of vegetation. And that's just a layer that didn't quite get turned into a coal, and it's called slate. That's the usual term we call slate because it's refuge. It's not fit to be used for burning. It's too dirty and it's too expensive to clean. So it has little or no coal in it. But the vegetation hasn't had the heat and the pressure because the it's not the good kind of vegetation. It's probably, in my opinion, it was a lake where you have these big ferns and stuff. It was a lake coming in of that come in on a later flood. It's not part of the big vegetation. Now, to grow the vegetation, it takes to make coal, oil, and gas. It takes big, huge lot of vegetation of the right compositions and with the right chemical and biological makeup. You're just not going to make coal from grass or tree leaves or whatever. You know, I mean, even any coal miner that's been a fool with will understand that. So what we have is special vegetation in the first Earth age, and we have special animals, big critters, little critters, all different kinds. And some of our evolution people want to call them a missing link, or we were come from them, but that's not possible. That's not in any way true. There's no way in the world we could have come from those animals, because they came from a time. And remember, the atmosphere at that time didn't need to have oxygen and nitrogen to keep you and I alive. And I have no doubt in my mind, from witnesses of these things, there was a different kind of atmosphere with a different kind of chemical makeup that could be used to grow the plants that it required to make the coal, the oil, and the gas. And now, the coal, the oil, and the gas is here. I've seen it. Gosh, I've been on these mountains many years, and there's gas wells everywhere, and there's coal mines all over. And there's places you can walk up and look at the coal mines, the coal seams, and sample it yourself. I've seen on top of 40, 50 foot above a coal seam, maybe 60 feet, I've seen river rocks, round river rocks. When rocks are spent in movement, they wear off to where they're round. They have different sizes. Some of them are big, some of them are very small. But I've seen layers of river rock 15 foot deep. I've seen a place out where you go into Utah, out of Wyoming, down the side of the road as you go down off of the Continental Divide, where they had a seam of river rock that was probably 20 foot thick, and there was not a coal seam nowhere in that area. I thought about that. I wonder if it had any gold in it. I used to prospect for a hobby. But anyway, it was on private land, so I went on by after taking a picture or two of it. But anyway, all this that happened in the first Earth age was sans people, no people at all. Not even these so-called Neanderthal people, which has never happened either. So I just wanted to bring that up about the coal seams as a witness to God's creation, because He knew we needed that, not just for our, heating our homes, but for things like steel factories and generators and things like that. Listen, your Father knew what we were going to do before we were ever created. He is the designer, not only of us as people, but He designed the world to suit us, because He knew how we were going to be designed. It's pretty simple. So all we got to keep in mind is, if somebody says they found a bone in the first Earth age, you know, a lot of these scholars and the professors don't teach the 3 Earth ages, but it's obvious they were there. There's an age before people, there's age with people, and there's going to be another age without physical people like we are. Now, we have physical bodies in the third age, like Jesus showed us, and we showed in our getting acquainted, our different kinds of bodies. But when we came into this world, you'll see when we do Genesis here as another part of our getting acquainted in just a little while. I'll do that before I go back out of the studio this evening. So, but I want you to understand that before this age, there was no people. Before this age, God was making the world, and who knows how many billion years, we have no way of knowing. I know there's people going to try to tell us they know everything, but all we know for sure is what God tells us. And when you turn your back on that, you're blind, deaf, and dumb. Plain as that. All right. So we'll look at that, and I want you to think about it. If you don't live in the mountains that has coal, now I know a lot of people around the world. These people around the world will see this. If they are pleased with it, they are welcome to join us. In a lot of other countries has gold. I know all over Europe, coal. All over Europe they have coal because I spent a lot of time over there and they were still using it when I was in the military I was over there for 30 months, meeting some mighty fine folks. All right, so remember, first stage, getting it ready. Genesis chapter 1 is getting the people and all the animals and all that. But the planet had to be prepared to sustain our kind of bodies, even though it's for this very short time. The time you and I are going to be in this body is short. I mean very short compared to everything else around us. In this age, it goes back billions of years. This age is just a few thousand years. And the next age is forever. That's the one you and I want to get in as a member of God's kingdom and of His family. Just that's simple, and that's how we want to do it. So I just wanted to mention that so it will, I know the arguments, I've heard them for 30 or 40 years, and I knew they were people whistling in the dark because of the kind of work I was exposed to and the different geological conditions. I've seen seashells of all kinds in near coal mine, near the actual coal. Usually right above the coal is sand. And then you can get streaks of these seashells and different kind of critters. I don't see how a bone could sustain that pressure and the heat that's involved with hundreds of feet of rock pushing down on the coal seam, compacting it, and on the rock. But the seashells are pretty tough, even though they look petrified. I expect they are. But anyway, they're there, and no doubt to anybody that witnessed uncovering of a coal seam has to be able to understand it had to be put there by a flood, and it has to be covered up by flood and erosion. There's just no other way that could happen. So God knows what He's doing. He got that ready for us, and I want you to think about that when people are trying to tell you that in the other Earth age there were people who were Neanderthal people. They couldn't have lived there because the animals, the big animals and all the other kind of animals, were designed to be able to eat the seeds of that vegetation and to distribute it. That's what animals, one of the very main function of an animal is to distribute seeds. Even from the little squirrels I see out here behind the studios, they're always out. The trees got great big hickory nuts. And those squirrels, it looks like they got a football in their mouth. They'll carry those off and store them up. And they are designed to do these things. And in the Earth age, they were designed to take care of that vegetation and seeds. I have no doubt in that first Earth age, there were seeds twice as big as a basketball. And an animal would have to be big to eat them. And then as they moved around, deposit them with their feces to fertilize them and grow up. This stuff had to be accelerated. So to get the vegetation, so for all these different floods, it had to be a flood to wash all that vegetation out of the place where it was going, and then bring the dirt behind it and the erosion, and then do it again. Now, it's obvious it had to be done because I know of at least 4 or 5 places in my home county where over 800 feet below the river there's a coal seam, and they just run shafts down to that and mine a very high grade of coal. That's 800 feet below the river. And then you have another 1,800 feet above the river with coal seams in the sides of the hills. So it's easy to witness, and it can't be denied. There were a lot of floods, a lot of vegetation, and it's not like what we got now. You look at if you ever get a chance to go around where they're doing a strip mine They probably wouldn't let you in now because they have to have a lot of security. But you could, if you get a chance to look at a mine, you can look at the vegetation that didn't quite make it to coal, and you'll see what I mean. But there was no people there, none, but a lot of animals, and who knows how many and what kind. I expect of everything from small animals up to very large animals. Well, we knew there were dinosaurs of 4 or 5 different descriptions, and we also know from places like Ashfall, Nebraska, there were a lot of small critters involved in that. So it's nothing new under the sun. Our Father knows what He's doing. All right, I just wanted to bring that up because it will help you fight off some of the claims that there were people before us who were not exactly humans. And that's not true. You'll see, we're getting ready here in a little while. I got one more thing to stop and do, and then we'll come back in here at this same studio, and we'll do a few chapters of Genesis and look at actually what did happen in the creation of you and I and our environment. It's pretty neat. It's not complicated at all. So we'll take a break and be right back.